This week on Upstream, we revisit my 2021 conversation with Marc Andreessen, Sriram Krishnan, and Aarthi Ramamurthy on tech culture and education. We talk about alternative education models, lifelong learning, and the shortcomings of traditional higher education. Please enjoy the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a good time. Hey. Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Good Time, the show which Aarthi and I host every single night at 10 p.m., where we talk about what's happening in the world of tech, culture, and pretty much anything else that pops into our minds. We have a very exciting show for you tonight.
We try and have a special guest every night, but we also have the usual suspects. We have Marc Andreessen, but our special guest is Erik. And Erik's someone I've gotten to know pretty well over the last year or so, entirely online, virtually. He's one of the, I'd like to say he puts me to shame because he reads so much, he consumes so much. He's just like prolific. He's always asking like really great questions and just always like very well thought through. But just as an introduction, he's an entrepreneur, investor, community builder. He's a general partner and co-founder at Village Global. He's also the founder of On Deck. And he's going to explain to us all what On Deck does. And they just had an acquisition or acquired another company. So he's going to talk about that as well. He also hosts one of the really popular podcasts out there, Venture Stories. And Sriram and I thought we should ask him about that as well, because, you know, every podcast, especially the good ones, are such an art form. Like we've been learning a lot just doing this Clubhouse, and it's like chaos. It's just ad hoc, and we don't do any prep, as Marc would constantly point out to us. And so Erik's podcast is the exact other opposite. It's like really well done, gets great guests. And so
I have been on it twice. So there you go. He gets
maybe not so great guest, but welcome, Erik. We're so happy to have you here. I know you're like prolific on Clubhouse as well, so we're really excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. First time caller, long time listener, first time caller.
Yeah, welcome. Tell us about On Deck. Like that's one of the things that we were really curious about. I also saw your tweet storm a couple of days ago explaining to us what it was, and it basically started out with saying it's Stanford for adults, and that really got my attention. What does that mean? Explain to us what On Deck does.
Yeah, so that's our long-term vision. I mean, if you look at what universities do, they serve as places where people find what they want to do. They learn the skills to get better at it, and then they make the most meaningful professional and personal relationships of their lives. And so what we're thinking about is, you know, why does that have to end at 22? And so, why can't there be a lifelong activity? And so On Deck started initially with this cohort model for people who were looking to start or join their next company. I started it when I was at Product Hunt, and I was looking to start or join my next thing. And it was hard to have a community of other people, you know, to find co-founders, bat around startup ideas. And so we ended up having this sort of, you know, imagine like a Y Combinator for founders before they have a company. And so that works well. And we wanted to take this sort of cohort peer-to-peer fellowship model and apply it to dozens of other categories like investors, creators, professional peer groups of any position you could imagine. Basically, each category serves as the supply for another group's demand. Like founders need to hire people, raise money, get distribution. And it's really this broader idea of, you know, when you go back to Stanford, when you go to Stanford, you don't just meet people in your major, but you also meet people at the art school. You also get a network of MBAs, neuroscientists, and you benefit from that rich network and diversity. So the vision for On Deck, just to close real quick, the vision for On Deck is basically to serve people from as soon as they graduate to when they retire. So if you imagine the journey of someone, they graduate college, they get their first job as a designer, then they become a design manager, then they transition, find a new job as a product manager, then they want to, you know, build an audience by starting a very successful Clubhouse show like you guys have. Then they want to start a company, angel invest. The idea is that there will be programs for every step of their career path.
By the way, we have not made any money yet from our Clubhouse show. So Paul, if you're in the audience, feel free to send us a check. Erik, and I'm excited to have also Marc here because I think this is something which all of you have thoughts on. I kind of taking a step back, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, and spoiler alert, me and Erik have prepped, I know he has a lot of thoughts, on just education in general, right? I think, we hear a lot about it on Twitter. We hear about Peter Thiel's perspective. We've seen the rise of models like Lambda. I'm just curious, just give us an overview of what's happening in education. What do you think is busted? And we'll go from there.
Well, we don't have 10 hours tonight, so we'll have to summarize because there's so many. And Mark, feel free to jump in. But the quick punchlines here are basically I'll focus on higher education. Basically, it's too expensive. It's too monopolistic, preventing competitors from bending that cost curve and making it cheaper. Right. It doesn't prepare people for jobs as well as it could, and it's not serving as a good filter for employers. So just to walk through those four really quickly. On the jobs front, we have too many people going to college and not enough jobs for all the graduates. Only 50% of employed college graduates got jobs requiring a degree, and only 37% take jobs requiring a high school diploma. Just to paint a visual, in 2010, there were 100,000 people with bachelor's degree who became janitors, and 5,000 with master's who became janitors. You don't need to go to college to become a janitor. No disrespect to janitors. On the filter side, the startups used to give, startups used to just zoom out. Startups used to give personality and IQ tests directly, but then it became sort of, politically incorrect to do so. So they outsourced those to colleges, and colleges was where you proved, IQ via the SAT and sort of broader conscientiousness via completing the 4-year program. And now that colleges are sort of starting to eliminate SAT programs or many graduate exams, they're pretending that eliminating these tests won't dilute the credential. But if you combine that with sort of grade inflation across the board, what does it really mean to get into college anymore? What does it mean to graduate? So that's the filter. On the expensive side, college debt is now, over $1 trillion. Our government spends 3% of GDP on it, and that number keeps rising, while also the costs have increased 300% since 1980. And this is what happens when government restricts supply. Price escalates. Quality remains stagnant. And not only that, our government also subsidizes demand with taxpayer funding, causes prices to rise even higher. And the last thing I'll just say is on the competition side, you'd think with all these problems, there'd be all these emergent competitors. People call Google and Facebook monopolies and, often, but they get disrupted every few decades. In education, the top universities have remained the same for centuries without new entrants, posing much of a threat. I think Stanford was over 100 years ago. That's the latest new entrant. And it's because basically universities are sort of cartels. They benefit from tax exemption at the company and endowment level. They get federal funding for research, subsidies for student loans. And unless you're accredited, you don't get those benefits. And they oversee the accreditation board. And so, it's very hard to compete. So all this explains the lack of innovation. Why disrupt yourselves when no one else can disrupt you? I don't know, Mark, if you'd add anything to that.
Yeah, no, Mark, before I think my question for Mark is, first of all, Erik, I have to say, that was the highest number of spicy sentences in the first few minutes from a speaker we have had on this show, right? Twitter is probably going to go blow up. And, I want to come back to Erik, but Mark, I know you have a bunch of thoughts on this too. Erik, obviously a lot, but I'm first curious, how was Marc Andreessen in college as a student? We want to hear about that.
I was a terrible student. Would have gotten a job. My GPA was not high. So I had to do a lot of, including I think probably some of you guys. So I had, a very different graduates did, or a lot of like sort of, private colleges and the kind of the big Ivy League schools. So I went to a very large state school. So it's the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Just to give you a sense of the size, 50,000, right? And so just like really big. And by the way, like also kind of a fraternity, kind of oriented thing. So they like to say they have the biggest Greek system outside of Greece. And so it's, one of these. And so it basically was this fascinating case study. And I was on the edge of this kind of, almost entirely math, chemistry, physics, computer science, electrical engineering. So almost entirely scientific and technical. So the liberal arts science, the engineering side. And it was really a tale because you basically had two kinds of class formats. You had the giant auditorium, with like a top professor. And so you'd have classes with, 500 or 750 or 1,000 students, in a giant auditorium listening to some guy, who you could kind of see through binoculars, kind of lecturing from the middle of the thing. And, that was great because world class, one of the co-inventors of the transistor was a professor when I was there at the time. So, some of these guys were fantastic. But it was a somewhat alienating. And then the other was the breakout sessions with the TAs. And this was fascinating. So, and this actually became very controversial. So the TAs were immigrants to the country. Many of them didn't speak English really at all. And it became actually a scandal when I was there, not just at Illinois, but this became kind of an issue actually across a lot of the colleges at that time, which is basically they were using the TAs as something approaching indentured servitude. It was like a very sort of weird labor situation where basically the price of entry to be a foreign student who got admitted to one of these schools from any number of countries was the TA, and you made like, I don't even know if you made minimum wage. I mean, it was really something. And it was like your job and you had to do it. And of course, you're there for whatever it takes or whatever from some other country, like your interest in teaching, sort of American undergrads who don't really care that much is not that high. And so I would say most of the TAs were, I would say, highly frustrated. And then there was, like, as I said, kind of big labor kind of issues that came out of that. And I would say it was not that great an experience for students. And so I kind of came out of it thinking like, wow, like I don't know how to educate, at least undergrads. Now, I have much better experiences in that at kind of, private schools in particular. The other just kind of obvious, I think maybe hinted at, but I'll state more explicitly, is just the current system is just not big enough, right? And so if you just compare the number of seats at like top end colleges, universities that can actually deliver a top end education, and you sort of cross correlate that to the 10-year-olds, worldwide per year, it's off by several orders. And it just doesn't make sense. It's like, it's actually really funny. We're in a historical period that's obsessed with inequity. And like one of the great inequities that nobody will elite colleges refuse to expand. And they refuse to go broad, and they refuse to franchise, and they refuse to go on the internet. And as a consequence, like these sort of the quality educations are just out of reach for even all all around the world. And so there's just this huge mismatch that can't possibly be met by building more, schools in the traditional way. And so the only way to get at the education that they deserve and that they would benefit from is to adopt a totally new model, and it has to be tech and internet based. There's I don't know them. And so I think Eric's have, models like Eric's much, much larger than anything that we think of today as higher ed.
But that is fascinating. Also, love that picture. I would say, we coming from India, we had a lot of our friends and, friends who are a little older than us go through the TA and the RA system. And I think your description of that, really rings true from my chatting with them in the mid 90s.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Hey all, Erik Torenberg here. I'm hearing more and more that founders want to get profitable and do more with less, especially with engineering. Listen, I love your 30-year-old ex-FANG senior software engineer as much as the next guy, but honestly, I can't afford them anymore. Founders everywhere are trying to turn to global talent, but boy, is it a hassle to do at scale, from sourcing to interviewing to on-the-ground operations and management. That's why I teamed up with Sean Lanahan, who's been building engineering teams in Vietnam at a very high level for over 5 years to help you access global engineering without the headache. Squad, Sean's new company, takes care of sourcing, legal compliance, and local HR for global talent so you don't have to. With teams across Asia and South America, we can cover you no matter which time zone you operate in. Their engineers follow your process and use your tools. They work with React, Next.js, or your favorite front-end frameworks. And on the back end, they're experts at Node, Python, Java, and anything under the sun. Full disclosure, it's going to cost more than the random person you found on Upwork that's doing 2 hours of work per week but billing you for 40. But you'll get premium quality at a fraction of the typical cost. Our engineers are vetted top 1% talent and actually working hard for you every day. Increase your velocity without amping up burn. Head to choosesquad.com and mention Turpentine to skip the waitlist. Fast forward to the end of 2024. Think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If learning a new language is on your list, you absolutely need to check out Babbel. Babbel offers a range of learning tools, self-study app lessons, live classes, and even podcasts, which have always been my favorite way to learn. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Babbel isn't just a game to kill time and make you feel like you're learning a language. It's not overly academic or rigid either. It's all about learning language for the real world. Babbel stands out because it's designed by real people using a modern conversational teaching approach. It's not always easy, nothing worth doing ever is, but it's straightforward and designed to help you start speaking in just 3 weeks. With Babbel, I was able to brush up on my intermediate Spanish to ramp up for travel to Argentina last year, and was able to set clear goals based on how much time each week I wanted to practice. Join millions of Babbel language learners across all age groups. Here's a special limited time offer for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only at babbel.com/Torenberg. That's babbel.com/Torenberg, spelled BABBEL.com/Torenberg. Rules and restrictions may apply. The tech world turns to the Brave browser for its unbeatable privacy protections. But did you know that Brave also has a private ad platform? Brave Ads offers first-party targeting, and it's been cookieless since day one, so you can relax while third-party tracking cookies disappear from the web. Today, millions of people turn to ad blockers to avoid being tracked and pestered online. But Brave's new ad model aligns incentives for users and advertisers. Users earn rewards for viewing ads, which they can save, spend, or pass along to their favorite creators. And advertisers score points for respecting user privacy, generating ROI without invasive tracking. So whether it's high-impact announcements on the new tab page or keyword-targeted ads in Brave Search offers diverse, private, future-proof ad formats for all your business goals. Join the future of advertising at brave.com/ads. Mention Turpentine to get 25% off your first campaign.
I want to go back to Erik. So, Erik, okay. First of all, I have to say, love the data point. I love how, just love that kind of scene setting that you did. Could you just talk to us about, if you had to kind of summarize the alternative approaches? You have one. You have Austin with Lambda School. You have, the Thiel Fellowship, which I think, is way more exclusive. Could you kind of walk us through, like, what are some of the alternate models that you see, which is not going to Harvard or Stanford?
Yeah. First, I want to build on Mark's point with it, because the hypocrisy is so frustrating. So Harvard, Stanford, I think they peter out at like 6,000 or 7,000 students, but it doesn't seem to be a reason why they couldn't, 3x the size, if not 10x, right? If it were any normal business with the entire world trying to get in, or trying to become customers, you'd increase enrollment. If you're offering a great product, more people should benefit from it. And I think what it shows is that a main goal of this university, or these universities are about status. And Thiel likes to use the nightclub metaphor, in that they don't gain their power from how many people benefit from it, but from how many people can't access it. And it's sad, because learning itself is such a positive sum activity, and these networks should get more valuable as they get bigger. But for whatever reason, they're clamping down. And if someone in the audience has a great explanation for it, I would love to hear it, because I don't see why they don't 2x or 3x their enrollment. Yeah,
I would say, like, there's a fantastic, actually, you just mentioned something, just to build on that. There is a fantastic Peter Thiel video/quote, which I can link to afterwards, where he says something like, the sure way to get all of Stanford's alumni, faculty, current students all mad at you is just to propose you're going to triple Stanford's enrollment the next year.
Unless it's for their children.
Does. I think they're making the wrong trade-off. I think they're optimizing for status at the expense of utility. I think the networks get more valuable. If Harvard can get all the people that go to Stanford and all the people that go to Princeton, I think it would be even more valuable. But that's a bit of a separate topic. Sriram, to get back to your original question, around sort of, what's the future? What are we seeing? If we look at college as, it's a bundle of many things, but if you look at it as a bundle of education, network, and credential, over a decade ago, with MOOCs, we started to unbundle the education. The education came online. You're gonna jump in?
Do you want to explain what a MOOC is for viewers who may not know?
Yeah, so it's basically just online courses. So the stuff that you had to originally go to Stanford to attend, basically we put it online. Massive open online courses. I'm not sure exactly what the acronym stands for, but and that didn't have as big of a disruption as people thought, because basically the completion rates were too low, because it's not just about the content. It's also about accountability for the content. And so now there's this new movement towards cohort-based courses, which is what we're doing and many other people are doing, where you get the benefits of the MOOC, which are, radically decreased price and, work on your timetable, but on your own time. But you also benefit from the peer-to-peer accountability in the same way that, you go to a Barry's Bootcamp or whatever, fitness class to see other people, ahead of you, and get that accountability. But so, bundles education, network, and credential. So basically we're seeing an unbundling at like every level of the stack, right? MOOCs did unbundle the education component. We're seeing accelerators, fellowships, peer-to-peer network, professional networks unbundling the network component, for certain careers. The credential one is actually the hardest to unbundle. And we really saw that with COVID. COVID really showed that the emperor has no clothes because the education was already unbundled. You weren't getting the network anymore, so it was effectively unbundled. And they were still charging the same price. And so it became so obvious that you were paying $250,000 for a piece of paper. And it showed just how valuable that piece of paper is, that credential and that signal. But for the reasons I mentioned earlier, the filter is getting worse. And we're also seeing digital filters get better. So the first iteration of this was skill specific credentials where in fields where you could show your work, like development or design. You have platforms like GitHub and Behance that can show how good you are for you instead of you needing to have this degree. And that works for certain fields. It doesn't work for all of them. Where I'm really excited, this is a medium to long term thing, is peer-to-peer credentials. Sriram, Aarthi, if I trust your judgment and you say this person is the best young person you've worked with, that means way more to me than a Harvard degree. And there are probably hundreds of people for whom I trust their judgment. I just don't happen to know that list of people. And so I'm excited for platforms that can enable that. And then we mentioned Lambda earlier. What Lambda's doing is it ties education to employment. So they help you learn how to be a developer, and then they help you get a job. And they're financially incentivized to do so with a totally different business model. You go for free and then pay at the end. And I think we're going to see that for a number of different fields. And then lastly, what we're doing is lifelong education. And so I think the people in the space that are going to win are people who unbundle a certain element of the experience and then try to rebundle some of the other ones on top of it, but in a sort of digitally native way.
I love this because I know this is a kind of a hot topic on Twitter, which gets people heated. And I have a question which I think comes up a lot in discussion. But
yeah, I just wanted to say, so Erik, like the last part that you said really struck a chord with me, where you said, if you the only thing you need from this peer-to-peer community thing is you need basically somebody else who you trust to be able to vouch for a person. And it feels so intuitive and obvious because when we hire in our day-to-day jobs and companies and stuff, that's kind of like of course we have like a whole recruiting process and channels and stuff, but part of it, like a big appeal to this is also like your network and who you trust and who they can refer and who they bring to the system. Like this is already how we've been doing this intuitively without really thinking through how we can apply this for scaled education and just continuous education that's lifelong. So it's fascinating that you took something that's just like super intuitive that we do organically and made it a platform and made it a community-centric product.
I say what Erik has done, and I think what Lambda School and others have done is just like amazing. Erik, okay, I'm going to ask you something which I think you and Marc might have strong views on. I would say one of the questions which comes up when people in tech especially talk about decentralized education is that the college experience is not just about getting a job, that it is a formative time for young people where you hang out with your peers, you figure out who you are as a person. And there is something about the community, collegial life, and Marc's kind of just done things you regret during that time. But that time period, which you can't replace with just the sort of unbundling. The second theme, I would say, which is connected to that, is the point of college just not to get you a job. It's also to go get a holistic education, say with the liberal arts or with sports and all these other things that may not just be, learning how to be a computer scientist. Now, I know you probably have a strong take on this. How do you think about that?
I think you're exactly right. I think, how do you unbundle getting wasted and getting high? And I'm just teasing. But no, you're
just so you know, our Indian colleges, are really boring. Like, yeah, we'll get into that just a bit. Sorry.
I think that was just to be clear. Please don't make this about everyone else. This was just
it's funny. I mean, Clubhouse in one way, for many people sort of like solve the use case of the, late night 3 a.m. dorm room conversation where you're just talking about, just really interesting topics. Sure, you're exactly right. And that's why I said unbundle and then rebundle. And so, yeah, you have to, it's about sports and dating and friendship and community. And, that's why, it's not, for example, when COVID is over, we plan to be, and we used to be 100% in person, but we're probably going to be 80 to 90% digital and, have epic. The 10% that's in person is epic retreats where people really get to know each other. We'll have our own versions of prom or, institutional sort of activities, our own version of sports or things where people bond over. Not everyone. A bunch of people have been begging us to do some version of on deck dating. We'll do something there that, in a safe way where people can get to know each other. But no, I think, Sriram, you're exactly right. Even those three things I mentioned, education, credential, and network, it's a lot more than that, both in the cynical way, when you talk about like tax shelter, hedge fund, but also in the very real way, which is, it's a coming of age experience, and it's there's a lot of serendipity, both interpersonally and more broadly.
Yeah. I would say, we were discussing, just our own education on the little back channel that we have earlier. And, one of the things which kind of struck us was how different the education system here in the United States is one from the ones that we grew up in back in India. So I actually want to throw to Aarthi for just a little bit. Aarthi, you walk us through what your regular schedule was like from school through college. And just so folks, if you think of academics and college, if I was playing pickup basketball, Aarthi was Michael Jordan. So Aarthi, you just want to kind of walk us through what the Indian education system looks like for that time period?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just so, I just want to caveat very heavily here. We have a lot of listeners who are from India, who are Indians, and so this may not be reflective of everybody, but this was definitely my time and how my education and upbringing was. So it doesn't broadly apply. I'm definitely not trying to stereotype this, but I think the broader context, at least for our Indian education system, is India is a very populated country. There are lots and lots of people competing for very few spots, and this applies for education as well, where the top colleges have only a certain number of seats, and there are lots of 10x, 20x the number of people competing for that same those few seats at these colleges. And so it just basically becomes a rat race. And what really happens is, at least for me, was it just starts pushing up earlier and earlier in your age group and range, where by the time you're 12, 13 years old, you kind of start prepping for what you kind of want to do. Your higher education or middle school to high school is all about like, how do you get yourself into a really good college? What does that mean? So you start taking like extra like lessons. You start figuring out like where you want to apply. I've seen like really crazy things where, parents would just like totally uproot themselves to move to closer to these like really big colleges so that, they could just, have a shot at getting their kids through there. And so mine was, I think starting like, 10th grade. I actually know very little about the American education system because I was not, I didn't study here. And so, in 10th grade in India, basically what you start doing is you finish school Monday to Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday, pretty much like most of the day, you kind of take these extra lessons. And, for me, we would just like bicycle from one place to the other and get these like tuition classes to like learn stuff. It's usually, entirely STEM based. So you would do, chemistry, physics, math, whoever took biology, which I didn't. I hated it with a passion. You kind of take these 3-hour-ish classes followed by homework, followed by tests. So I remember doing this for years and years, until we made it to college. And then there was this like brief respite. And then you realize that you still have this rat race to figure out like where you would land a job in. This is, I've seen like, a few folks, over here. I think my cousin brother is actually here on this clubhouse for the first time. And, I think we all went through this very traumatic experience. And it's very, very different to what I've seen, here, at least, just superficially viewing it. And, I think, the point here is like, part of it is you kind of get forced into this because it's just scarcity and you just have to like make it through to get to like the top colleges. Part of it, I think Sriram and I were talking about this on like, it kind of preps you for later in life in a really weird way. The stresses are different, the pressures are different, but you kind of get a hang of like just being able to handle pressure. Especially, just the stereotype of like your Asian parents trying to expect like the very best from you. That was definitely my experience.
I have to say, my DMs are blowing up. I think Aarthi describing 12th standard exams, which is a phrase that all the folks who grew up in India will know very well. it is 1 week where your entire life is determined and you prepared for that since like age 7 or onwards. I think we just triggered about like several hundred people here. I've been getting a zillion DMs from everybody who grew up in India. It's intense.
Are you going to share your numbers at any point?
Yeah, what? Yeah, go on.
Wait, what numbers? Like GPA numbers?
Or rank and class numbers?
Oh, we had this thing.
No,
I don't
I'm
know if
kidding.
you do it
No.
here.
I want to move on, but I just to embarrass Aarthi and who will kill me right after the show. Some anecdote. Aarthi and I have known each other for over 20 years. I think some of you know. Back when I met her, when she was in college, she won an award for being the first student ever to not miss a single class across several years of college. Right, which not one. She not missed a single day, a single session across multiple years, and the college actually gave her an award for that, which I don't think has ever been mentioned before. I just want that to be documented online forever. But anyway, that's good. I just want to kind of get. I'm so dead. Okay, so okay, this is amazing. Okay, thank you so much, Erik.
Upstream with Erik Torenberg is a show from Turpentine, the podcast network behind Moment of Zen and Cognitive Revolution. If you like the episode, please leave a review in the Apple Store. Hey everyone, Erik here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at erikaturpentine.co. That's ERIK at turpentine.co, and let's partner together.